All right, everybody, let's get started. Everybody can hear me okay? Okay, excellent. All right, well, everyone, welcome welcome today to our webinar on AutoCAD Top Tips. My name's Morgan Smith. I'm a technical consultant with A2K Technologies. What we're going to do is just go through some of the items on today. We're going to probably spend, I don't know, maybe half an hour, 40 minutes going through the webinar, and then after that we'll have some question and answers. So the agenda will be basically a little bit of introduction about A2K Technologies, because A2K is a fairly new company. It's only been around for the last 6 months, so we'll, I'll have a little bit of a chat about who A2K is and like that. And then from there we'll go on to best practices in AutoCAD. So for those users that have been using AutoCAD for a while, what things do we do all the time? What's the consensus? Those sort of things. Then we'll go on to some drafting settings. So today will be mostly about object snaps and how to actually eliminate construction lines. So if you're always drawing lines, trying to create rooms or drawing objects, then this one is for you. And then once we finish that topic, we'll then move on to the drawing units. We'll be covering items such as drawing scale and also drawing units as well, and how they relate to each other. Then we'll have a quick wrap up, talk a little bit about what upcoming webinars are coming during the next month, and then we'll open it up to some question and answers about some of the topics that we talked about today. All right, so let's get going. So a little bit of an introduction about A2K Technologies. We've been here around now for about 6 months, but basically we've the summary or what about A2K is that we provide industry-leading solutions, training, consulting, and management firms specialising in design technology. So the design technology, we're very heavily focused on the technology space, because if we didn't have the technology, then we wouldn't be able to help you out with your work. We now have a multi-million-dollar turnover with about 150 staff now in Australia, New Zealand, and in China as well. We're also what they call an Autodesk Platinum Partner and the largest channel partner in Australia. So what that means is being a Platinum Partner with sort of the highest tier market. Moving on, we then have, because we have 150 staff, we're also very highly knowledgeable and industry experienced in the areas of support, training, consulting, and business development teams across infrastructure, building, mining, and the manufacturing sectors. Not only do we provide these services, but being a partner, an Autodesk partner as well, we also offer other services as well. You can see on the left-hand side there, we of course sell Autodesk products, but we also provide quite a few other services as well. You can see there's a bit of Microsoft, Global e-training, also some BIM products there as well, and also like 3D connection like that. So you can see that we not only just provide software, but we also provide hardware services as well. Probably the best way to describe A2K is this little pie chart. It sort of talks about the breadth and depth of what we actually offer. So you can see on the software piece of the pie, we have the Autodesk, and then next to it we have hardware with the Citrix and also Microsoft. And as we work our way around the wheel, of course we have support, which is how we help you guys, especially with live chat online and through the phone support as well. Myself, being a technical consultant, I spend a lot of time training and consulting and manning the phones and helping you guys with the support issues. And then if we're required, I actually do help with CAD management services, so a lot of installation and deployment items as well. Our value proposition, so basically, what we're on about, what we want to do, because we have 100 staff, we have the ability to deliver more, so that way we can cater for your needs. So regardless of what industry you're in, we have technical consultants and staff that are actually able to assist you with that. As a business, we have the desire to actually deliver better. So what it means is we continue to deliver or innovate, offerings to meet your needs and make sure that you're a valued customer. So that way, it's very important that that we value as a customer, and anything, and we review technology in the market, and we offer those as to try and meet your needs and to make you competitive and also more productive. And then finally, our commitment to exceed your expectations. So whether you're a small company or a small medium enterprise or a large enterprise, we have staff that have come from multiple different organisations, so we understand your business needs and where you're at. So and that helps us help you out with what we do. Okay, so that was a little bit about A2K technology. So I'll speak a little bit about myself. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to actually meet me in person, but my name's Morgan Smith. I'm basically the technical, what they call a civil and geospatial technical consultant. My background is I've been in the industry now for probably about 20 years, starting out in site development works and then slowly working my way along to roads and highways, rail projects, and the last part of my career I actually spent a lot of time working on large infrastructure projects. So they could range from massive highways, bypasses, tunnel projects, and reconstruction work from the cyclones and other bits and pieces. So my specialties is definitely CAD management. As working on large infrastructure projects, you definitely develop a lot of those skills to make everything work and to make sure that everything is done on time when the client needs it and needs it now. So understanding how those processes work and how all the CADs, so how AutoCAD works together, all the document management systems, how the engineers do their work, those sort of things. And then the other area I specialise in is the installation, deployment, and licensing of Autodesk products. So that can be anything from your licensed servers to deploying of an image, a software image, to multiple computers, or just debugging general issues, or even building customizations for AutoCAD. So that's a little bit about me. I'm also a qualified senior civil draftsperson, and recently I became a member of the IOST Engineers Australia Association. Okay, so let's get to the first topic. So best practices. I go, do you know the general rules of how to use AutoCAD? What I found was I started using AutoCAD about 20 years ago, and I found that once I started learning it, quite often we would just get thrust straight onto a job and we just have to run with it. So many of us had little training before we actually produced useful work. And I found even now, after using the product in 20 years, there are still things that I'm still learning, and I even forget little things that I once knew as well. Basically, when I talk about best practices, it's usually what they call the fundamental rules that represent a consensus among serious users of CAD. So as you bump into your CAD managers or your senior drafters, you'll always notice that they'll draw a certain way, or they'll construct, put together or assemble their drawings in a particular way because they know that that is the quickest and most efficient way. So that's sort of how the best practices work. But even once you've laid down those fundamental rules, then always there's going to be exceptions to those. So those rules won't fit 100% of cases. They may be the 90%, and like anything, we always try and make it work. And as I run through these items, it's pretty much not how to use an AutoCAD sort of talk. It's more about just a reminder of the items that people quite often overlook when they actually, are using AutoCAD. And it sort of prompts us just to make sure that you sort of go, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Well, I hadn't thought about that one, sort of thing. So, yeah, let's get into it. Okay. Believe it or not, my first number one is using the help system. I've found over the years it was a little bit light on, but Autodesk has got really serious about documenting the product now, and it's amazing the amount of things that you can actually find in there. Sometimes it can be buried away in there, but the easiest way I find to find something is just to press F1 while you're hovering and you produce a tooltip. When the command is actually active, it will then pop it up. If you're using a dialog box, quite often there will also be a help button, usually in the bottom right-hand corner, usually next to your OK and your cancel buttons. When F1 is pressed, depending if you're connected to the internet or not, usually if you are, it will go to that following location that I've shown on the hyperlink there. Other than that, it will actually just go straight to a location on your C drive. Okay, next one, draw everything full size. I've spent quite a bit of time explaining this one to people because it is a very important concept, especially when you're drawing in AutoCAD. So the best way I could sort of describe it is that when I first started drafting, I was actually working on the drafting board, and so before you would start, you would say, okay, I've got to draw this detail. What scale is it? So you'd have to then decide, okay, this is the scale that you need before you start drawing, and then you lay it out on your drawing, and then off you go, and then you would actually draw it up and make sure all the dimensions were correctly. In AutoCAD, we've got the advantage of actually deciding the scale when we print the drawing. So we create our models in model space, draw them up full size, and then we can go into our layout space and then cut layouts or viewports. Go to our layout space and then cut some viewports in there. We can determine whatever scale we like or how much of the object that we would like to show, what we want, if we wanted to detail a particular corner of a beam or a connection or something like that. And this is probably the other one. When you draw something full size, you can also measure the lengths, areas, the volume, without having compensating for any factor. So if you've decided to draw something that's not to scale or full size, usually when you have to make a measurement, you measure a distance and then go, okay, this is scale 1 is 25. I then got to divide it by a particular number or, to get the true size. So it takes a lot of the guesswork out of it, and when you also draw, when someone else comes along and uses your file, they'll assume that you've drawn it correctly as well. So it sort of has a bit of continuity there. My next step is use blocks often as possible. This is a really good one because what it has the opportunity is if you have objects that you repeat a lot in a drawing, you can basically define the block and then copy it around the drawing, and then if you decide to change that to a symbol or whatever it may be, open it up, modify it, and then once you save the definition of that, it will then update all the other instances in the drawing. And because of that reason, what it does is it actually allows you to dramatically reduce your file size. So if you drew a circle or a complex block and then you copied that multiple times around in a drawing, that is actually, AutoCAD is actually treating that as individual entities, and it's actually storing it as such. But if you just define one block and then use it multiple times, then you're actually saving on draw on space. Next item, update large amounts of work quickly. So for example, if you do decide that you don't like the way that your manhole cover is displayed on the civil utilities drawing, it's a matter of just editing the block and then all 300 manholes will update. If you didn't use that, then obviously you'd have to go through and modify all 300, which would actually take you a long time to do. And because you have 300 copies of those manholes, using the one block, make sure they all look the same as well. And the final one is really important as well. Don't explode them unless you have a really good reason. Obviously, once you've exploded them, they're not linked back to the original block definition. So when it comes time to update, you'll find it very hard. You have to go through and update each one individually. While I'm talking, the next point is never override dimension styles, but one point I forgot to make was don't explode dimensions. That's another very important one as well. As soon as you explode a dimension, they're not dynamic anymore and they have no relationships to the objects in AutoCAD. So that's a really important one as well. Okay, never override dimension styles. This is sort of leveraging from what I said earlier about drawing everything full size. Always draw your geometry so that it's actually correct and it actually represents the object. And then once you've actually done that correctly, when you use an associative dimension, just a normal, they call it just a normal dimension, it will actually read back the true length of an object that's dimensioned. If you don't draw things correctly and you don't use your associative dimensions properly, you'll have the issues where if you don't draw correctly, everyone who uses the drawing will assume that it is correct when the value is actually not. I've come across issues in the past where clients have actually documented concrete beams to go on bridges, and someone's used a couple of they've done some overrides on the dimensions, and they've come back and everything doesn't fit correctly because of that reason. It may have been 15 mils longer than what it should have been, or 20 mils longer. So very important. It eliminates mistakes. People can see straight away what's going on, and because I find that when people get busy, they make assumptions, and it's not, the mistake is not quite often not picked up until it's too late. Layer names, layers, very big part of AutoCAD. Best way I do things is I use separate layers for different kind of geometry. So myself, my background is civils, roads and highways. So when I'm doing the road layout, I'll actually create separate layers, one for my curb lip, one for the curb and panel, one for the curb back, one's for my footpath, one for my line marking, things like that. So that way, I assign logical names to them because it makes it easier to control your drawing when they're all layered in a consistent manner, and it also makes it easier to manage them as well. Don't know if you've ever had the experience where you've opened up a drawing that's come from somewhere else, or someone that hasn't had a lot of experience in AutoCAD. You'll open up the layer manager and the layers are quite often a jumbled mess, and you've got to try and figure out and go, okay, what is this? And then you have to use a tool, say for example, layer walk, to actually review the drawing and spend time to understand what's actually in it before you can actually find any use for that data in the drawing. So my recommendation is, logical names equals easy to manage multiple layers. So the more logical the names are, the easier it will be for, to manage them. Once you, if you're actually drawing in one drawing, and then you get to the point where your models are starting to get really complex, I always recommend users, whether they're drawing in one drawing or using XREFs, that you set all your properties on your layers to by layer. So avoid the urge to use multiple colors, line styles, line types on a single layer, because once you introduce XREFs, that when a drawing is referenced into another, it makes it very difficult to actually apply overrides to the layers if you've done individual modifications to each single layer. So for example, if a layer is red in an XREF, and you set that override and then you've referenced it in, and in your drawing you want to make everything green, well, everything will turn green except for that one object that you've done a color override on, and it will stay red. So it's really important, and I found it's the easiest way to give you that control and maximum flexibility to do what you need to do. If you do find that you come across a lot of drawings that that do have these overrides that have been placed onto these layers and they're not by layer, use the Q-Select tool to select or move to different layers and then set them by layer. I'll be covering a little bit on quick Q-Select later on. It's one of the other points in the best practices, so I'll be talking a little bit more about that there. And then the other important one is, and this relates to blocks that I spoke about earlier, is that when a layer resides within a block definition, it's really important just to have one layer, so that way it makes it easier to control the appearance of the block. If you have a manhole cover and it's drawn on C-manhole and it's green, you can put it on, you can specify when you create the block, you can put it on layer 0, all the contents inside it, save the block, and then when you insert the block onto that layer, it will then adopt the color of that layer. So if you set the layer to green, all the contents of the block will go green. If you set the layer red, the block will then display red. So really important one. It's really great if you want to do that sort of things. Okay, drafting tools. Sort of probably we know they're all down. We know they're there. All the little icons down the bottom left-hand corner of our screen when we're in AutoCAD. If you use the earlier versions, they used to be all words. You still can switch them to words if you're not sure of what the descriptions are. AutoCAD's changed them to icons because now there are so many great tools in there. I've sort of had to all line them up side by side. So the most common ones that probably people are familiar with is the direct distance entry, or your dynamic cursor, the O-snaps or your running O-snaps, endpoints, mids, your object tracking, your temporary tracking, and your polar tracking. Most clients I come across, they'll have a couple of these tools switched on, but the majority of the time they'll actually turn them off. Not sure if that's because they don't understand how they actually work in conjunction with each other, or sometimes they can get in the way. So really important that you understand how the tools work, because once you understand how they work together, it can actually dramatically speed up your workflows and also leverage the precision of the objects that are drawn in AutoCAD. If you do have complex drawings with a lot of geometry, just make sure you don't overdo your snaps, because that can lead to jerky cursor, and AutoCAD has sort of got so many choices of all the different snaps that it can use that I find, keep it to about 3 at any time. Anything more than that, AutoCAD, like I said, has to jump around and go, oh, do I want this midpoint, do I want the arc, do I want the extension, do I want the intersection, or whatever like that. So keep it really simple, and it'll actually make your snaps a lot more predictable and a lot more easy to use. If out of those 3 snaps, say you don't have one of those selected in your settings, you can at any time just do a shift right click, and it'll come up with a list of all the snaps that appear in the settings dialog box, and you can quickly select that. As you get more confident, if you're a typer, you can always type in the 3-letter alias that represents that snap as well. Setting text height to 0. I had this one hammered into me pretty early, and when I started to draw, basically, if you when you set a text height, it actually allows you to say when you set it to the text height to 0, it actually allows you to control the text height every time you enter a text. So if you're using ISO CP in your drawing and your detail headings are 2.5 mils or 3.5 or 5 mils, if your text style is set to 5 mils, you want to create a title that's 3.5 mils high, you won't be able to do that. You'll have to choose a different style. So the symptoms of that is that if you place it as a text and it's only giving you one option, it means you have to fix text style. Other styles in AutoCAD are reliant on text styles, so really important. For example, dimensions or table styles. They actually use text styles within them. So if you draw a dimension, you can see the arrowheads, but you can't read the dimension text. It's a possibility that you're actually using a fixed text height. So again, setting it to 0, maximum flexibility. You can choose whatever height you like. I do know that when I've set up CAD customizations in the past, I've had requests to set up special text styles for each height, and there'll be 5 different styles representing each height text, so 2.5, 3.5, 5, 7, and 10 mils. Another big one, don't use the name standard. That applies to all styles that exist in AutoCAD. My graphic there, I've got text, dimensions, and tables as an example. AutoCAD can't use in AutoCAD in a template file for one to be a default template that they would assign. All its users will use the name standard, but they'll go in and they'll redefine the contents of it. And if you insert a block from one drawing to another, and they both have word style standard in it, depending on what the object is, the destination drawing will take precedence, and so whatever the setting was in the other drawing will actually get lost. So what I encourage people to do is actually just set up a standard template and then just banish them from the CAD system. So make sure your standard style names and everything like that reflect what they're actually used for. So just like your layers, use logical names. So for example, your text styles, use your font names. With your dimensions, you can use discipline. So for example, in the civil infrastructure, we quite often draw in meters, but our guys in civil structures, they'll be drawing bridges, gantries, and things like that, and so they'll actually detail in millimeters. So we actually have 2 different we call it dimension styles to support that, so that way they're actually labeled correctly. Then once we get to tables, obviously you would label it to reflect the use of that table. So if it's a set-out table or something detailing reinforcement or something like that, actually give it a logical name, so that way when the users actually use the tools, they actually understand what they are. The logical names go, oh, okay, so this is set out, we use this for this, or we use that for that, and so it just makes it easier to manage as well. This one doesn't come up very often, but be cautious when using RefEdit. It was a problem in the earlier versions of AutoCAD. Some users didn't actually know what they were doing when they were actually running the RefEdit command. But anytime you double-click on an XREF or a block, you basically fire up the RefEdit command. So there has been instances in the past where someone's edited an XREF, the RefEdit toolbar pops up and they go, what's that? Oh, I don't need that. Close it, and then not realize that they're still active in the command and they can't figure out how to get out of it. So what I've done in the past is there's a system variable called xedit, and you can set that to 0. So what that does is that actually stops that accidental editing of XREFs. So there's that option there for you. And finally, QSelect. This was the one that I hinted on earlier for modifying layers. I've found it a fantastic tool. Before they had QSelect, they used to have to use the filter command. Very, very, very clumsy if you're not used to it, understanding how it actually works and everything like that. But with QuickSelect, easiest way to run the command is if you have your properties open. There's usually an icon in the top right-hand corner. You can click on that, and that will pop up the QuickSelect dialog box. Or you can just right-click on the screen and notice on the second image there, I've got a little rectangle around it. It has the QuickSelect. So I found it very useful for fixing problem drawings. So manipulating layers or pieces of text. If I want to search for pieces of text using a particular wildcard, I can do that. So that would be an example of a complex one. And then once you actually work through the dialog box, it's really important to understand how actually all the parameters work. So as you work your way through the dialog box, each object type has different properties or parameters, and then you can go through, say for example, what I've got highlighted on the screen, block of a particular color equals by layer. So instead of say by layer, I wanted red, I would actually select red, and then any block references that actually had the color red, it would actually then pull it and populate that in the list for you. Okay, the next topic we're going to talk about is drafting settings, or are you tired of drawing construction lines? I thought snaps were pretty cool, and then as Autodesk developed AutoCAD more, they then started introducing, if you're tired of construction lines, then really pay attention to this one because it's pretty cool. Okay, so when you're learning, so just a quick recap. When you're learning to use AutoCAD, you could do precision entry, so locating positions in AutoCAD using coordinate entry. So the three different types that you would have learnt would have been what they call absolute Cartesian, or X and Y. So we actually specify a point absolute based on the origin. The relative Cartesian, so that's specify a point distance away from the last point entered using X, Y values, and then the last one, which is your relative polar coordinates. I remember when I was learning, I didn't actually sort of really remember what the names of them were, but what I used to remember was absolute and relative were the two key terms that sort of kept on popping up all the time. So if you remember what the absolute action is and what the relative action is, then usually you're pretty good, good to go with those sort of things. Okay, object snaps. Everybody knows that we can use object snaps. They're fantastic because as you draw in AutoCAD, you're drawing precise objects. So when you're drawing precisely and you use the object snaps, when you hover over an object, it knows exactly, AutoCAD knows exactly precise endpoints of each line, where the center point is, and all those sort of objects were an example there, a quadrant as well. So when you're taking your measurement, you're not just picking it off the screen, you're actually, instead of almost getting the end of the line, you're getting the exact end of the line. So that way you can ensure that you've got your precision. So once you start drawing in AutoCAD, some things don't really need to be that precise, but then a lot of things do. So if you're doing mechanical parts or other things where tolerances are really important, you want to know that you've picked up the end of the line and that all your bits are going to fit together. Polar tracking. Polar tracking is not one that I've used a lot personally, but I have seen it in action. What it basically allows you to do is once you have the option enabled, you can specify different angles of deflection, or what I like to call it. So as you draw, you can right-click on the tool and say, I want to use 15, 30, or 45 degrees, and it just automatically locks in at that bearing, and then you just enter in whatever distances and stuff like that. So it's called a transparent command, so it can actually be done in the middle of any command. Okay, these are probably the ones that I found that doesn't actually get a lot of use. And when I show it to people, they just go, wow, that's actually quite interesting. I didn't know that it actually could do that. So most of the time, clients users use object snap. Then you can take it to the next level where you can actually what they call object snap tracking. So you can actually locate a new point based on the existing, existing object snap. So what you basically can do is you can find the precise center of an object by tracking from two midpoints of two sides without actually having to draw a construction line. So if you know what those distances are, set snaps, go to your object, hover over the object, then the temporary lines will actually appear, and then you can start typing your distances in like that. So once I've finished running through some of the different tools, I'll actually do a quick demo on that because it actually needs to be demonstrated so actually you can understand actually how it works. Temporary track point. So you can use Object Snap by itself, Object Snap Tracking by itself, but if you want to use what they call the temporary track point, which means you're actually snapping to a couple of points and then setting a temporary point and then actually drawing an object using that point, you use temporary tracking points. So it's important that both Object Snap and Object Snap Tracking are switched on at the same time to enable that. Okay, let's just switch to AutoCAD. This is our example. So what I've got is I've got a part here. It's basically got 4 circles in it, and I have my shape and my object. And what I would like to do is draw my for one circle, the diameter of 25 mils, and then I have 3 others there that are a diameter of 6. So the easiest way to do it is before you actually start working is let's confirm what settings we're actually using in the commands. So I come down to my Object Snap symbol, click on Settings, and on the Object Snap tab we have our Object Snap on and also Object Snap Tracking on as well. So for this example, I'm only going to use, let's have a look, endpoint and midpoint. They're the ones that I'm interested in. Actually, let's just go just midpoint. And so we're going to use temporary, what they call the temporary track point as well at the same time. So you have to have those both enabled. Now, AutoCAD, now we always have, when we're in setting our settings, we also, you know, sort of go, oh yeah, there's just a piece of text down the bottom of the dialog box. It's not really nothing that important. But when you actually read it, it's actually it actually talks about the temporary tracking point and the vectors. So it says to track from an object, to track from an O-snap point, pause over the point while in the command. A tracking vector appears when you move the cursor. To stop tracking, pause over the point again. So I thought I'd draw your attention to that because that's really important to actually make this functionality work. If you don't do the pause, you don't get the tracking vector. So if you find that once you try this yourself, you're going, oh, it's not working, I just can't figure out what's going on. And you realize that you go, oh, wait a second, I'm not doing the pause, and therefore the vector's not actually appearing. So, all right, so Object Snap on, Object Snap Tracking on, okay. So to start with, let's draw the big circle at this end first. So let's go circle, center radius, and where we would like to go. So draw the midpoint over the midpoint of the left line. So for example, we want to set up through the center line of this object here. So as I come over, I move my cursor close to the object, and you notice as I hover, it actually produces a tracking point, and then I can then drag to the right. The dimension in the picture, 75 mils, so I type 75. Now, as you type, if the cursor goes away, just move it a little bit so it appears, and then it actually measures 75 units from that left line across, and then I just type in my circle diameter of 25, so D for diameter, 25. And there's my circle. I've actually got it on the wrong layer at the moment, so let's just change that back to object. And make sure our current layer is also set to object. Okay, so similarly for our other 3 circles here, we do exactly the same thing. Come across to the midpoint. Let's run our circle command. Uncircle. Come to the left side. Hover. Then it kicks in. Actually, I forgot to actually run. Let's start that again. Circle. Okay. Now, before I do this, I'd like to use temporary track point override. The easiest way to do that, you can type TT at the at the command line, or you can shift right click and use this guy up here, temporary track point. Click on the item, and now you can see at the command line it's now active, and it says specify the temporary track point. So again, move our cursor over the midpoint of the line, and then we pull it to the right, and as we go along, we want a distance of 40. That, and go enter, and then you can see it places a little green tracking point on the screen. Okay, if I want to choose, if I want to draw the circle up the top there, again, go close to the tracking point, drag my cursor up. Distance there is 19 mil, so I type in 19, enter, and then ask me what's my diameter. So I'll go D for diameter. I'll go 6, like that. And it's just a matter of just repeating the same process, replacing the other 3. So pretty cool. You know, when I learnt how to do that, I thought that was pretty amazing. So I thought you'd enjoy that one too. All right, so back to the PowerPoint slide. Last little point on drafting settings. A lot of users don't actually know this, that temporary construction tools actually do exist in AutoCAD. I was a bit surprised myself when I first learned, because I used to just draw normal lines and do whatever I wanted. So there's special lines in the fact that they create what they call infinite guidelines. So depending on what you want to do will depend on how the line actually behaves. So if you're creating what they call guidelines that are infinite in both directions, use the X-line command. If you need to create one in infinite one direction, then you can use what they call the ray command. They're definitely designed to be temporary. I always put them on a layer and then turn that layer off before plotting, because they will show up on the drawing. And for those users in a multi-user environment, be really careful when using them in XREFs, because it's an entity or a line within the XREF. If when you save the drawing and another user loads that XREF, it will actually show up in their drawing too. So that's why I sort of emphasize that, you know, really temporary. Okay. Now we're on to the probably the most important one. I guess I should have probably started with this topic first, but it's actually one of the real fundamentals of using AutoCAD. If you haven't got your head around drawing units and drawing scale and those sort of things, things can actually be quite complicated. So we'll sort of talk about why it's important, and then what you can do to actually fix those issues if you do come across it. So quick history lesson about what actually AutoCAD thinks about when it comes to drawing units. So AutoCAD is a special, like when it was originally created, if you ever had a look at the units, you can see they're actually set in meters, millimeters, angstroms, or light years, or whatever it is. So you can actually assign a particular unit in AutoCAD, but AutoCAD basically thinks, you know, in units. So 1 unit is equal to 1 meter, 1 unit is equal to whatever it may be. Most important thing is units don't have a real world size. So a unit is just a unit. It doesn't have any value until you actually assign something to it. So mentioned earlier, because it doesn't have a real world side, it only has something relative to the real world when you actually have a name and you assign that in the units dialog box. So for example, millimeters or meters. And basically this name doesn't mean anything in AutoCAD, so as far as it's concerned, 1 metric unit is 1 imperial drawing unit is equal to 1 kilometer and stuff like that. A unit is a unit. It only means something when we assign a value to it. So if we decide to create a drawing and we're going to draw in meters, we then use 1 unit is equal to 1 meter. If we're drawing in millimeters, again, because we've assigned that value to it, then that's what it's going to be. And then we communicate that to other users so that they know that that's the way it's drawn. Okay, for example, in drawing, if so probably to explain that concept a little bit better, when you copy and paste a 300mm by 300mm rectangle into any drawing, AutoCAD really pastes it 300 units by 300 unit rectangle. So then, if we take that same rectangle and then paste it into a meter drawing, the rectangle will only be 300 by 300. So you can see that the physical dimensions of the rectangle haven't changed. There's still 300 units, but because we've actually assigned a unit to it, that's what it actually it has meaning then. So we start drawing, we assign 1 unit as 1 millimeter, so therefore it's a 300mm rectangle. If we're drawing in meters, 300 meters by 300 meters. And so likewise, if you could take your 300 meter by 300 rectangle and you paste it into a millimeter, that's drawing, it actually becomes that. So just thought I'd put that in there just to sort of clarify it a little bit, because it can be a bit confusing, because later on I'll then talk about the relationship between meters and millimeters and how to actually scale a drawing back and forth between those two units. It's just important to understand this before you actually do that. So switching between millimeters and meters, if you actually need to draw in millimeter units when the drawing is in metric units, you need to scale the objects in the drawing in millimeters or vice versa. So if you're in millimeters and you take objects that have been drawn in meters and you want them to apply, you need to make sure that you scale everything up by a factor of 1,000. Vice versa, if you're going from meters, if you've got a meters drawing and you're taking millimeter objects and you're putting it into your meter drawing, you have to scale it down by a factor of 0.0001. Okay, so there's no variables or no settings to actually control that. It's just being aware that you have to select everything in that drawing and then use the scale command and then the correct conversion factor to resize everything back and forth. Okay, insertion scale field in units, or the DD units command. I'll just keep on clicking through. There we go. That's the guy there. Drawing unit. This actually controls the way that objects are actually or content is inserted into AutoCAD. So when you set the insertion scale, it's only going to affect objects such as blocks, drawings and images and things like that. So for example, if you set your units to millimeters in one drawing, meters in another, when you want to, what I call, you want to paste cross units, so you're going from one unit to another unit, I find the easiest thing to do is actually write the block out, write the objects out as a block. It actually remembers what that insertion scale is, and then when you go to insert it, it will actually read that value and then compare the two values in the drawing and then apply a scale factor as it gets inserted. If you decide to set the insertion scale to unitless, it's important that you set the two system variables, insert unit def source, insert unit def target. They're actually in your options tab. And basically what that does is if you insert a block and it's set to unitless, you're setting the default value. So if you set that to millimeters, it will assume that whatever you're inserting is in millimeters and it scales it appropriately. Important note, the automatic scaling doesn't actually happen with annotative blocks because it's the actually annotation scale that actually controls the scaling of the block. So if you find that you're inserting blocks into other drawings and the scaling doesn't happen, then check to make sure it's not an annotative block. Now, if we have done everything correctly, we've set our units correctly in both drawings, we've set it correctly in our blocks, and we're sort of going, well, yeah, I don't understand it. It's sort of like, what if I check my units and everything is still weird? Well, do you have any object enablers loaded? Is usually the first question I ask. by default in AutoCAD, got to get this right, AutoCAD MEP and AutoCAD Architecture and I think one other built into the product by default. Same with the raster design object enabler, they're all built in by default. So 9 times out of 10, the answer will be yes to this question. Now what happens is, if you do have object enablers loaded, then check your DWG units. For those who are not familiar with the command DWG units, it's basically a command that was introduced when Autodesk started creating its vertical applications. For example, the screen capture on the right there is actually from Civil 3D. When you're actually in its equivalent of DD units, it has the opportunity there that you can actually set. You can see highlighted in the rectangle, the red rectangle, that there are 2 options there. That controls the scaling of the objects and also the setting of the AutoCAD variables to match, so that's your DD units. So it's important to know that even though you set your DD units, this command may be affecting the scale of your objects as well. And my final comment is it basically does for the vertical apps what insert units does for plane, vanilla AutoCAD. Okay, so quick example. For example, if a drawing was created in Civil 3D, however, DWG units takes precedence over how the insert units are set in plane, AutoCAD. So no matter what you set the units to, for example, if you set your insert units to meters and it's thinking and your DWG units are set to inches, everything will scale at inches rather than at meters, and it drives you crazy and you don't know what it is until you actually figure that out. The DWG units command is a command line only tool, so you need to type that in as a dialog at command line. Okay. All right, well that's all on the drawing units. What I'll do now is we'll sort of do a conclusion and a bit of a wrap up, and then we'll give you an opportunity. I'll answer a couple of questions or 2. Based on our time, I can probably answer about 2 or 3, and then I'll wrap up. So, upcoming training and webinars. This is a quick snapshot of the ones that are coming up this month. As you can see, we've got quite a few there. I'm particularly interested in the one roadway design with InfoWorks 360 Pro. Fantastic product, that one. Yeah, I get quite excited by that. There's also other ones there. We've got some Autodesk talking on construction. There's another one on support top issues. So if you find he's the leader of our support team, and give the webinar on the top issues that they come across our support desk. And how to fix things like that. So I always found that was an interesting one. If you're interested in technology, we're going to have a presentation on some Microsoft technology, and then the final one there, which is the Barracuda storage solutions. But because it's only a short list, there are more on the website. So go to aukadtechnologies.com.au, and I'll have links there for those. I thought I'd throw in a little, being on the support team that answers all the queries, I thought I'd throw this little one in. Do you know, quite often Autodesk has what they call a customer satisfaction program. So if you're a contract manager or a software coordinator, you may have received a phone call from Autodesk and saying, how are you going? Are you happy with everything, how it's going on? And quite often what they'll do is they'll then ask you to rate your experience using numbers. So I've found it is explain what the numbers actually mean. So if you have a score of 9 or 10, the ratings are indicators of positive experience, so whether you're happy, how happy you are. If it's a 7 or 8, it's considered neutral, and then anything below that is deemed negative. So if you do have exposure, so if you do get a phone call from Autodesk, feel free to give us a 9 or 10. And we'll give you the thumbs up doing that. So just a little did you know thing there. Right. let's go to some questions and answers. I'll just have a look at my panel here and see what is actually there. Okay, so anybody that has any questions on those topics that I've presented on, feel free to ask, and I can answer those for you. Okay, we've got quite a few here. Have a look. Okay, I'll ask the first question was actually about the webinars. All the webinars are recorded and they are available on our website. There are links there for that. Okay, so next question: is it possible to quick select to search for more than one property, or is that only available using filter? Okay, so I'll just go back to AutoCAD here. Open up my quick select. Now, with the options, when objects are selected, you can actually say apply to entire drawing or only particular objects. So if you're only interested in filtering out a couple objects, you can select those, and then it'll come back and only report back what's actually in the drawing. If I want everything, I'll select all drawings. And then from there, it actually tells me all the objects that I select. So if I have two different circles, one being white and one being red, or I wanted to filter something out, I set my parameters here, and then I come to the bottom options here, where it actually allows me to actually include and exclude. So you can set the parameters and then apply those to the selection set, then run the tool again, and then you can say, I can then exclude the objects from there as well. So a lot of users think that you can use QSelect only to do one filtering action at a time, but you can actually do multiple filtering actions, and you just tell the tool to actually build or append to the current selection set as you actually run through it. Okay, I've got a topic here on a question about covering more complex issues, example 3D models, and turning them into 2D drawings. So that I think definitely is our, what you call the model documentation feature in AutoCAD. I'll forward that on to our team that organises all the webinars. I'll get them to add that to the list for you. Okay, final question. How to open another DXF file with the same units that are used? I'm not sure about that one. Let's try something. Erase that. So DXF out. Save that. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm just looking at the contents of the DXF file. If there was a setting in there, it would probably be stored under one of these parameters that's actually stored in the DXF file. As you can see, as I scroll down, it actually contains different settings that were actually contained in the drawing. So, for example, mere text, there's one there for LT scale. So based on that, let's go Control F, and let's see if we can find one, if we can find anything on units. Line units, that's to do with the precision of your line units. Let's keep on going a little bit further. A unit sets, that could possibly be it, not sure. Here we go. Insert units, 4. So 4 being millimeters, meters is 6. When we're in AutoCAD, run the command F1 and 4 being millimeters. So that's a real quick way to actually check to see what the units are in your DXF file. Is open up the file using a text editor and search for insert units, and then look up the values. So in this case, this one was 4, which is millimeters. All right, well that's the final question. Thank you everyone for attending today. It's been a pleasure presenting to you. If you have any other suggestions or topics that you'd like to cover in the future, feel free to contact us via email or whatever like that. I'll just pop my last slide up, just so you can see our telephone numbers and our email. So if you have any other topics that you'd like covered in future webinars, just let us know. The email and the phone numbers are all down there. All right, thank you everyone. Thank you for attending.